Harborfield School District since 1960. Well, I may not be making everybody happy with my question and my comment. I would like to start with saying that this $3 million cost for these turf fields could be far better spent by increasing our internet capability, installing district-wide wireless, and we would be able to afford to put a wireless tablet in the hands of every Harborfield student. Investing in this technology will save our community money in regards to the paper, textbooks, printing materials, and other school supplies that we currently spend money on, as well as help to bring our district up to the 21st century technology. I'd like to know what other school districts have these artificial turfs and what revenues they are gaining from having these turfs installed. Certainly, if it's a revenue maker for us, I think it should be seriously considered. However, I think that with these very difficult economic times that we are living in, for somebody who lives in the community, our salaries are not increasing as our property tax dollars are. With the costly inflation of a tax field, as well as what it will incur on all of our community, we can't misrepresent what we want from what we need. We want a turf field. We don't need one. We need more resources invested in our antiquated technology, and I apologize to the board because I do know that we are doing the best that we can. However, we will still be paying for the installation of these fields far after we are redoing the turfs. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in your comments there were actually two specific questions, so let me direct those two questions. In addition, two other members of our district staff that are here who you may ask questions of are Mr. Valenti and Mr. Jasil. One question, I believe, was what other districts in the area have turf fields, and I think Mr. Valenti put together that information.
Good evening, everybody. Currently in Suffolk County, I did a survey of all Suffolk County school districts. There are approximately, I think, 58 school districts. Out of the 58, 26 currently have turf fields, 25 do not. So it's probably a 50-50 split. Locally here in the South Huntington, in the Huntington area, South Huntington High School has a turf field. Comac has a turf field. Huntington High School has a turf field. Cold Spring Harbor, even though they're really not part of us, but they're our closest neighbor here in Nassau County. Elwood does not have a turf field. Obviously, we do not have a turf field. Half Public Hills has turf fields, both at their Hills East and Hills West high schools, and Northport does not have a turf field. I don't know if I just covered them all. So again, that's probably a 50-50 split.
And then I believe the second question related to the ability to collect fees for use of the fields. So it has been stated in some of the literature that has been mailed home, the district currently does not have a policy in place that would allow us to charge rental fees. The board is actively considering such a policy, but there is no such policy in place. I think the question was perhaps as well, what is the history of other districts in the area and their ability to collect fees for use of the fields? And I think Mr. Valenti had also collected information related to that.
Yeah, again, as part of my survey, I outreached to my colleagues in other school districts and asked them about their revenue. It seemed like districts that did not have lights had very limited revenue that was generated due to the fact that the turf fields, first and foremost, are for their own teams. So every day after school, their teams practice and they compete on those turf fields. Well, if you don't have lights, basically in the fall, you have very limited time. You have about a window of about 2.5 hours if you were to rent them to any outside organizations for, for their use. Same thing again in the spring. Most of the time that you can give to outside organizations to rent them would be in the form of the weekends. In the fall, as you know, we do have home football games, so that would be the one caveat that would negate that. But then usually the rest of Saturdays and Sunday, they could be rented to other organizations. In terms of revenue generated, that was a mixed bag. Some districts who have policies in place for the charging of their facilities, they generate up to $2,000 to $3,000 per year, which would then go right into the general fund of the school district. And that money, again, has to be spent based on the fiscal year, so it doesn't carry over into subsequent years. Other districts, again, may not charge their internal youth organizations because those organizations have a certain number of participants and they're from their community. So there's all kinds, some districts are all over the place when it comes to establishing a fee schedule, so it varies. But none of the districts that I did outreach to did indicate that they, say, revenue-wise, were taking in $10,000 to $12,000.
My name is Chris Marzik. I'm a district resident for 47 years. 3 children went through the Harvard schools, all of them participated substantially in athletics. I was very active in the Harvard Fields Booster Club for probably 10 years while my children were attending the schools. I've always been very supportive of the schools, and the schools did a very, very good job of preparing my children for college and beyond. And I'm very pleased to live in Harvard Fields. And I've also been very pleased every year to look at the budget newsletter that the district puts out. And for a number of years, the district put out the budget newsletter and has a scale of per pupil spending. And it was really a question of bang for the buck. And the per pupil spending in Harvard Field was always at the tail end, the good end of the spending curve, showing that the district was spending taxpayer money very wisely and getting terrific results in terms of student achievement. When I say student achievement, I mean athletic achievement, I mean academic achievement, and certainly in the arts, where Harvard Fields has always had wonderful programs for all children. I read this information about this Ron proposal just in the past week or so, and immediately several questions came to mind. I should add that I'm a retired school administrator. I retired within the past 2 months. In the interest of full disclosure, I do not work for Harvard Fields, but last week I filed an application to be put on the sub-list for Harvard Fields, but I'm not employed by the district. I mentioned that I'm a school administrator because I have some level of familiarity with some of the topics that you're discussing here tonight. The first thing is the matter of timing, and Mr. Darrow addressed the need to have the vote in December. We all know what December is like. This year, December will include Hanukkah and Christmas. This year, I'm sorry. My point was that the timing of the filing of the petition in August, causing the vote to be in December, is not coincidental. I believe that it was specifically tailored to keep down participation of people who might not be supporting this particular plan.
Incorrect.
Hear, hear.
My name is Steve Brown.
How's this? Can everybody hear me now? All right, don't take my time off for that, all right? Good evening, my name is Steve Dunbrower. I have 2 boys in the district, one at TJL and one at the high school. As I did when I spoke at the last board meeting, I want to open it again, thanking each and every one of you for everything that it is that you do for this district. It is not an easy job. We know it. And the work that you do is very, very hard work, and it's appreciated. It sincerely is. I think the board also has done a terrific job of reminding us in every communication since the last board meeting that this proposal has nothing to do with the board. I was happy to see some additional information come out, but at the last board meeting, we spent some time talking about the current financial status of our district. And I had specific questions around the current debt load of this district, and none of that information has come to light since the last board meeting. And frankly, it's not available on our website. So I do have a few questions. First one being, very plainly, what's the current debt load of Harborfield School District in outstanding bonds?
$29 million.
I'd like the board.
Yes, Mr. Nimmo will answer that question.
Okay. I'm not getting penalized for time right now. We could use a new audio system too. We put that in the budget.
Sorry. As of June 30th, 2013, $31 million in bonds.
Okay, how, 31 million versus our total budget? It's about 40 to 45% of our total budget. How do we compare to surrounding districts?
We don't know how that compares, and how we're rated and how investors look at us is debt service as part of the annual budget.
Okay,
Okay, our debt service on this is $4.5 million a year. It amounts to $77 million, almost $78 million. So we're not anywhere near investors being concerned. When we get investors become concerned, when we run up to 25% of the budget, which means if we had $20 million worth of debt service, the Putney district would be considered, investors would look at us differently.
understood. And our current bond credit rating is what?
AA2.
Thank you. Okay. AA2, which is very similar to a lot of our surrounding districts. But here's the deal. In terms of how we look versus our surrounding districts, I have the numbers. They're not hard to find for other districts, okay? Comax currently at about 35%, Half Hollow's at 24%, Huntington's at 3.1. This is total debt to outstanding, or total outstanding debt to budget. Elwood's at 23%, Northport's at 13%. We are higher than that, okay? It goes without saying. We are in a position here where this district should not even think about floating a bond for something we don't absolutely need. Floating a bond, we need to separate floating the bond from asking people to dig deeper in their pockets. Another question for the board, the $30 a year, what does that include? Does that include a reserve fund to pay for the new fields in 10 years, yes or no?
No, it only funds the $260,000 minus the $65 annually, exactly.
Okay, so when it comes to replace these fields, there is information out there saying that we could just bond again. Is that true or not?
It is not, we cannot bond fields for maintenance. We can only bond capital projects.
So the $30 a year is a very, very low number because we're going to need to add to that number a reserve every year to pay for the replacement of these fields. I will finish with one concept. I get along by my two boys, and the first place I go to when my kids ask me for something is, what is this going to cost? So this is not a debate about the merits of turf fields. It's not a debate about the pros of turf
Can I
fields
ask you to wrap it up, please?
or the cons. This is about we don't have the money to do this, period.
If you visit our website, and on the website, under the budget page, we do have a page-by-page detailed analysis of our budget. So the information about the debt service should be included in that. If you have have additional questions, please let us know. But it is on the
appreciate
budget.
that, but I would ask that the Board of Education post the audit reports like all of the other school districts do online.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa Kroc from OMS PTA, and this question came in from a community member. How accurate is the $3 million estimate, and how has this been verified? If the project comes in under budget, will you be able to use the additional bond money to fund other improvements, whether it is to athletic facilities or other capital projects? There has been talk about a 20% fudge factor, so how would this apply?
I guess either Mr. Nimmo or our architects who would like to answer the question about the cost estimates.
Thank you. The architects, when the project proposal came in, it was reviewed by our architects, and the architects confirmed the numbers that you saw were the architect's estimates, not the petition estimates that came in. So those are the architect's estimates that came in under $3 million. What was the next question? Sorry.
If the project comes in under budget, are we able to use the money for other?
The money can only be used for items which are listed in the proposition. We can't choose to then go spend things on other things which are not in the proposition. The community is voting on the specifics of that proposition only. So if it's not used, it's just, we wouldn't borrow it. Whereas if the project came in $5 million, we wouldn't borrow $3 million, we'd borrow $5 million.
Hi, I'm Liz Burney, I'm OMS PTA also. This is also a question from the community. Hello? There we go. Hi, this is Liz Burney, I'm from the OMS PTA. This is another question from the community. What are the annual maintenance costs of the turf field? I saw 18,000 earlier. And although some reports indicate that the maintenance of synthetic fields are lower, why would there be an increased cost to our budget for maintaining them? Sure.
I'm going to ask our Director of Facilities.
Good evening. Presently, if we talk about a football field, which is one of the areas that this new turf field would be installed, we've done a very breaking down budget because the Board of Education and the administration demands that we show them how we derive and what a field costs to maintain for the year. And that football field that we presently have at the high school, which is a high school football field, not a Division I football field, not the most premier football field as compared to colleges, but certainly a football field that does rank as well as other grass fields in our areas, is maintained by our staff, and that includes aeration, top dressing, fertilizing, overseeding, cutting, laying out the lines for the football field annually, then painting them weekly, cutting along weekly, weed whacking, sprinkling, maintenance for the sprinklers. So it is an in-depth budget. That comes to $7,500. If you add the second field that we have and we maintain presently, which is not a football field, but is in a field that's adjacent to the existing tennis courts, the total between the two of them is probably $10,000 for the same kind of maintenance, but not as frequent because it's not the premier football field. So our $10,000 presently compares to the $18,000 that was proposed to maintain two turf fields by Mr. Saros. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caroline Millet, and I have two children in the district, one in TJL and one in OMS. Every year, I feel like I hear we're going to lose or cut some kind of program, clubs, or what have you. It's cyclical. I feel like our children are always losing. I feel like as parents watching our kids, we're watching them drown in debt. They are going to go off to college, they're going to be in debt. I think you guys do a wonderful job. I know it's not easy. But money is hurting right now. Everyone's hurting. And $30 may not sound like a lot, but it might be to some people. I'd rather see it go towards academics. I'd rather see it go to a need as opposed to a want. I'm very much into athletics. We all need them, but I think the academia needs to take precedence over that. And I think adults, board, parents, teachers need to lead by example and to be fiscally fit. If you can't afford it, don't buy it.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Costa. I want to say, first of all, that my husband and I have always supported the budget. We really appreciate the board also trying to stay within the tax cap levy, because besides voting ourselves out of our home, I'll be voting my daughter and grandkids out of their homes, and what's the sense of having a great school district if you can't go to it? So, but I have two problems with the proposal. One is that I've read that it will raise the tax cap levy about 1/3% annually, and for indefinitely, it might be a 15-year bond, but as somebody pointed out, the fields will have to be renovated, I guess you'd call it, probably before the bond is even up. But I don't know if everyone's aware, this increase is coming at a very bad time when the Huntington Town residents are also facing a possible 15% tax increase from the New York State LIPA reform legislation. If Huntington does not win the suit against LIPA, Northport could go up, their residents, Northport School District could go up almost 60%, and the rest of Huntington, we could go up 15% increase in our taxes. So this is at a very bad time, I think. The other thing that, when I've heard other people talk, I realize how important sports are. Some students do well in school and graduate because of them. They get scholarships. My daughter got a partial scholarship to Syracuse. So I realize how important sports are. But with or without artificial turf, athletes will still have the football, lacrosse, the sports, whereas other kids are losing certain activities because they're trying to keep the budget down. And the ones who are especially losing, I think, in our district are our kindergarten kids. Do you know that out of 118 districts on Long Island, only 10 of them have a half-day kindergarten? Only 10. And with the new core curriculum, they're trying to teach them to read, write, spell, and do math in kindergarten. And ours are trying to do it in 2.5 hours, where they're really being put at a big disadvantage compared to over 90% of all the other kids on Long Island. And if my taxes are going to be
Just ask you to
raised,
wrap up your comments, please.
I would like to see them raised for something, especially like that, or other educational things. By the way, Huntington did 6 years ago get turf and I think also the track. And now they had to cut their kindergarten in half-time program. So I think we would pay for things later. So
Mr. Lima, could you, there's been some discussion, I think, as to the implications of the proposal on the tax levy cap. Can you just give us a quick overview as to the effect?
Ms. Costa is correct. The tax levy allowable cap will be raised approximately 0.34% over what is current each year going forward. So this year particularly, we have 3.18% tax levy cap. That would have been a 3.52 tax levy cap. In part of that.
Hi, my name is Kim Cagnazzi. I have 3 children. 2 have gone through the school district already and are graduated. One went to Dartmouth and on to medical school. One's at NYU, and I have an 8th grader. I'm saying that only because I have 3 kids have 3 different interests, and my 8th grader is into sports. My other 2 are not. One was music, one was academics. But first and foremost, I want to speak with my PTA hat on and ask a quick question. This is from a community member. Are there any negative ramifications for college placements for athletes who have had less exposure to playing on turf fields versus grass? That's from a community member. Is it true that some sports programs will reject applicants or not other scholarships to those athletes who have had minimal play on turf? So those are the first 2 questions from the community.
Mr. Valente?
Hello again. That question I know has been raised over the course of the issue with this bond let me just say, kind of reiterate a little bit, when I was asked this at a prior board meeting. There's nothing to my knowledge with any college coaches or any of our student athletes that I know to date that have been rejected or looked over, so to speak, by a college coach or somebody who was interested in recruiting them based upon the surface that they play on. For my own research and my own edification, I actually outreached to 2 people over the course of the last week to gain more knowledge. And those 2 people, one of which is a good friend of mine. His name is John Danowski. He's the head lacrosse coach at Duke University. I had the good pleasure of coaching his son, Matt, who was an All-American at Duke, back when I was a coach at Farmingdale High School for football. And so I know John very well, and I actually put a phone call into him, and I said to him, you actively recruit, obviously, athletes throughout the nation. And is there, in fact, a difference between whatever surface they play on in conjunction with whether they're offered any type of scholarship money, and he emphatically said that's not the case. It really comes back to very key indicators for the 1% of all high school senior athletes that are actually afforded an opportunity to possibly play at the next level. And those concepts and those key points are very, number one, you have to have the academics. Case closed. Number 2, you have to be an upstanding citizen, obviously, with good character, good morals, because you're going to go off to college and you're now going to be representing that college. And number 3, you obviously have to have talent. If you don't have talent, it's going to kind of go in line with potentially where you end up playing. Division I is the premier. Most of our athletes, and what I've experienced over the course of years, do play in the Division III perhaps. Some have played for Division II. Some play for private, colleges, etc. So, to answer your question, the other coach that I outreached to was from Providence College. He's actually a former student athlete of mine. He's also the head lacrosse coach, and I asked him the same question. He was the Duke in charge of recruiting, and he does all the recruiting for Providence College. And I asked him the same question, and his answer was basically what I just told you. No impact at all, whether it's coming from turf or grass. Student athletes, if they have all of the various intangibles that I just spoke about, they'll stand a good chance of being recognized perhaps and be afforded an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Valente. Now a little more personal. My hat is off from PTA, and I'm just a resident in the district. For argument's sake, let's say this $3 million proposition passes, and in May our budget does not pass. Is the district legally bound to continue building the turf fields? So, academic programs, music programs, and yes, sports programs will probably be shut down, but construction will go forward.
If the budget doesn't pass in May, this allocated $260,000 will still remain in the budget. If the project can't stop because the community voted on approving the turf field, so it will go forward.
And just one more thing. I just stand here unopposed to beautifying our district. Let's update our stands, lights, fields. Let's level the deplorable room that we call an auditorium and build a state-of-the-art performing arts center that actually has a sound system. Let's put in a pool for the swim team. Let's paint the walls and purchase new desks and chairs. The list goes on and on. I think I can speak for all when I say there are a lot of projects around here that are long overdue. However, we should not put any of these before and above giving our children a high-quality education that the public school system was created first and foremost for. Education first. I'm not opposed to any of these, but let's fundraise for these. Let's not put them on our budget and reach from the well that has nothing left in it.
Good evening. It's tough to follow that. It's Michael McCarthy, and I want to thank you all very much for hosting this forum tonight to answer a lot of questions. I don't know what the school district does, but I have 2 children in OMS, and they are very, very happy to be here. I don't know what you give away in school, but they're very happy to get to school and they're getting a fine education. I must tell you, I was very intrigued by the concept. We would all love to have a turf field. My little boy is in athletics, and what a nice thing to have. But I also understand the whole issue of needs and wants, and I get the sentiment of the community. The question I had, and I think I know the answer to it, is really more of a legal one, is this an all or nothing proposition that will be voted on the 11th? Because I note that it would be nice to have one turf field at the high school, but, you know, in fact, do we need two of them? And the second field at $1.1 million is about 34% of the proposed bond issue. So I'm curious, and I think the residents of the community would like to know, is if this is all or nothing, or you know, can they kind of cherry pick this thing, so to speak?
It's the entire project. If it goes down, then nothing will be installed and nothing, the project would not go forward. You cannot pick one item over the other. It's just the entire project would move forward or not move forward.
And I guess as a corollary to that, if the individuals that have brought this petition forward had the same amount of support in the community, they would be able to do it perhaps in a lesser amount at a scaled-down version at a subsequent date. Is that correct?
Again, any community member can submit a petition, but once the petition and the proposition is submitted, it has to go through legal counsel. We have to make sure that everything is adequate and appropriate before the board could actually go through this process again.
Thank you, Mrs. Liddell. Thank you.
Good evening, thank you, board, and thank you for the rest of the professionals here tonight to be with us. As somebody who is, sorry, my name is David Steinberg. I have 3 daughters. I have a daughter who's in 3rd grade at TJL, and a daughter who is in kindergarten at Washington Drive. And basically as a concerned parent, I was involved in the budget process last year. And during that process, for those of you who were here, it was an arduous process, was trying to get within the cap, which was at 3.18% last year. And to do that, we had to make almost $1 million worth of cuts to the budget, which included cutting out, I think it was just about 3 teachers or so, losing in budgets passed, second teams at Oakland Middle School, losing electives at the high school level. We've been going through this cutting process here in Harborfield for some time now. When we look at this project, we look at now the actual impact onto the budget. It's really not $30 a year per person, as we discovered already tonight, because we do have to set up a reserve fund that's going to have about $80,000 or $90,000 a year that we're going to have to pay for as residents. So when we look at what we had to cut last year, my question to the board is, looking forward to next year, do we know at this point what our rollover budget is? And can we predict, knowing that municipalities have a 1.66 tax cap or even on that, about where our tax cap will come in? So we can then actually look at going forward, if we pass something like this, or if we're going to spend our money on this, what are we going to lose in this year's budget potentially because of the decision we make on December 11th?
Mr. Nima?
We've started to work on the rollover budget. As far as the tax cap is concerned for next year, there aren't a lot of the factors that we need. We need factors from the controller's office. Most of the factors we get in January. So we can't really, surmise what the tax cap will do this year. There is a separate number that, as you said, the 1.6% budget is for the towns and villages. That's for municipalities which start their fiscal year in January 1. It's usually, they do it for the 6 months prior. So our budget starts in July. The number the controller gave us was not even being available until January. So that has a big effect on it. We also get an effect from the amount of increased brick and mortar construction that's in the district. That's another factor that goes into it. Right now, it's too early to speculate on what the cap's going to be next year.
Good evening. I'm Donna Ryder. I'm a resident of Centerport. I've been in the district for about 11 years. And I
Sorry.
Okay. My first question is, how were Steve
as well as the need for handicap accessibility? Or was that kind of put in by the district because this was proposed?
The proposition, the handicapped accessibility was included in the proposition. In developing the proposition, in order for a proposition of this sort to get state aid, there needs to be a school-related project associated with it. Otherwise, the state is not going to provide aid on the turf fields. So when the proposition was presented, you really need to look for something within
So
the
you
school's
guys
activity.
had to find something so that we could, whether we would have
No.
spent the money eventually anyway or not, had to put something in so that this could get state aid?
It's not the district putting something in so that a project could get state aid. When the petition and proposition was presented to the district, there was a lot of research that had been done to determine how a project of this magnitude would be able to secure state aid. So there were various ideas that were floated around. The one idea about the asbestos tile is an annual project that the district goes through, so
Okay,
it's part of that project.
You guys had to put this in order for the project to
There
garner
was
state aid.
a project had to be included in order to receive state aid.
So,
The
yes.
individual who developed the petition and proposition actually did a tremendous amount of research
That's fabulous.
before the individual could.
My question, because every year we hear, and I've gone to some meetings, certainly not enough, about how the budget is constructed. Every year we talk about how state aid isn't what it was supposed to be. We're going to rely on state aid to fund part of this, but we can't count on it. And I guarantee we'll hear that somewhere down the line. So it's more than $30 per household. Beyond that, assuming that everything with turf fields is wonderful in the universe, we have a Canadian geese problem in this community, which has to be addressed on the fields as well. I did some research, as well as the fact that it can cost upwards of $130,000 per field for it to be recycled when it needs to be replaced and removed. I don't know if that's included in this $3 million, but the cost is greater than $30 a household, because as soon as this gets passed, the tax cap goes up.
Ms. Eskin, other comments, please?
Yes, I will. The cost isn't necessarily in dollars, it's going to be what's going to be missing in 10 years, which is generous, particularly if we rent out the fields. The more exposure the field has, the less life it has. It will be your child's teacher's aide, it'll be a teacher or a librarian or greater class size. It's $1 million out of the budget down the line, because $800,000 now is not $800,000 in 10 years.
I'm Linda Fury from on Main Drive. I just have one quick question that follows up on what David said. Because I do want to be an informed voter, and I'm sure the board's had time to think about this. But if it did pass and we have to take the $260,000 next year out of the budget, any ideas where the cuts would come from?
Let me give some information about the tax cap, and I guess Bill can also address this as well. The allowable tax levy cap will include the $260,000. So as Bill mentioned, this year's tax levy cap was 3.18. It would have been 3.52. But because this project is within the tax levy cap, you're not at that point, you don't have to reduce anything. You're only going to get to the point where you would have to reduce if we make the decision that we have to, that the tax levy cap is too high. So you don't have to reduce anything to compensate for the $260,000 at that point.
So I thought that for the first year, we had to take it out of our regular operating, or it's always a capital budget?
Yeah.
All right, so for the first year, it's $280,000, but then if we decide we can't match that, then we have to pay that no matter what.
The 260 minus the anticipated $65,000, which gives us actually the tax levy impact would be about $195,000, right?
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Doreen Johan, and I have two concerns. The first one addresses the asbestos replacement or removal. You just made a statement that there was a lot of research that went into this proposal. So I would like to understand how and who made the decision that asbestos tiles needed to be replaced. Specifically, what is the condition of the asbestos floor tiles? Was asbestos sampling conducted? If so, what type and how many samples were taken per square feet? And has it been determined that there is friable asbestos in the floor tiles? Because if there is not, there are other alternatives to replacing asbestos tile, which includes encapsulation. So I'll let you answer that.
Let me just point out about the statement that I made about the research. You know, when the community resident presented this information to the district, the reason I wanted to share with you is that the individual came to us with all the information and research is because he actually did. I mean, when he presented this information to us, one of the reasons that the board and the district that we were able to present this to the attorneys and the architects is because the information was there. If the information was not there, then we would be in a position to say to the individual, we are rejecting that petition. So the reason I referenced the research is because he did go above and beyond. And during that course of his research, he was in consultation with the state, or contacted the state education department, and learned very clearly that when you present a magnitude of this project to a district, the only way for the district to secure any kind of state aid is if there is an internal project associated with it. So when I reference again the research, it's because of the work that this individual did. You needed to balance the project of the turf field with another school-related project in order for the project to be aidable. Otherwise, there would be no aid associated with it. You would be dealing with only the $260,000 and not the $65,000. With regard to the asbestos tile and all of the questions that you asked specifically, I'm going to ask Drew Cacciola, our Director of Facilities, to talk to you about the annual process that we go through for abating our asbestos tiles.
Hello again. Annually, we have an outside consultant that comes through the district and does an extensive, he's an environmental consultant. He does an extensive survey of the district year to year. He hands us a report, and the reports are in my office. And what we do is we attack that report every year in the summertime when there are no students or staff in the buildings. At this time, we do not have friable asbestos in any public areas in this district. Any friable material that we may have would possibly be in a crawl space or in a closet that would be a mechanical closet, and there is minimal friable asbestos in this district. The non-friable material, which is the vinyl asbestos tile, is in classrooms, under carpeting, is in corridors, and it is encapsulated, as you discussed when you say it can be encapsulated by having carpet over it, or even having it in a corridor, and it is examined all the time by ourselves, we keep a record of it, and also by this outside consultant. You cannot.
I would like to better understand the condition of the tile. If the condition of the tile is bad or deteriorated, then it's something to be looked at, but you just said that there's no friable. So it seems to me that this may not be the best choice, and perhaps the residents want to see those results to better understand the whole process, because many people do not understand what's involved with asbestos.
I agree with that completely, and the reason that these areas are the areas that are addressed are because, as I stated, those are the only remaining things that are in public spaces, non-friable asbestos. I welcome anybody to come to my office. I will gladly take you on a tour, show you the sampling results, show you our reports. It's all public knowledge.
I would definitely welcome that, and again, I understand that you have certain rules you have to follow to put this through, but, you know, it may be prudent to re-examine these results and what really needs to be done. One last question. Can you just tell me who the appointed asbestos management coordinator is for Harborfields, and what is their role and training?
EnviroScience Technologies is our outside consultant. and I am also the responsible person within the district, and I have had many hours of OSHA training, asbestos training, and that's why I have that position in this district.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just want to urge the residents, though, if you have an opportunity to look at those results, there are other options besides asbestos removal, because once you begin that process, they have to follow rules on how to protect our children and time frame of when to do that. And then just the
Can you just wrap it up, please?
Yes,
Thank
the
you.
other quick thing, I know a lot has been said about the turf budget, and I think everyone's done a good job, but I just want to state that while there are studies that are going out there now with the health effects of artificial turf fields versus natural, I understand that the data is
Ma'am,
skewed.
I know there's a
finishing
lot of
up.
people behind you, so please
I
finish
know,
up.
I'm finishing up. I just want to state, because most of it was budget driven. I just want to state that the studies are few, and the parents should be aware that in science, more studies need to be done before conclusively it can be said whether it's safe or there are health hazards or not. Thank you.
That will give me an opportunity to just make one comment. I just wanted to publicly thank Dr. Gefkin for the extensive memo that he had forwarded to the board at our last meeting. A question had been asked as to the potential health implications of our students using turf fields. We asked Dr. Gefkin to forward us his medical expertise. His extensive memo is on our website, so for anybody having questions about the potential health implications of use of turf fields, the reference his memo, which you can read at your leisure. Thank you.
Hi, it's Kathy Seary. I've lived in the district 19 years. I raised 5 kids. 4 are gone, 1 is still around and I hope he graduates. I just had one question. I know Cold Spring Harbor did fundraising and donors to get their fields. Has this avenue been explored with the committee for our turf field potentially? And why not?
I know in Cold Spring Harbor, they actually had a donor who presented the 2 turf fields, as well as the maintenance costs for this replacement. To the best of my knowledge, that has not been considered here in Harbor Fields.
Is there a reason why? Not just one person, but I know Whitman was able to do some donations and fundraising. How come we haven't?
The board would not be the proper forum for soliciting funds for the district. That would be up to community members if they decided to raise money and to donate.
Well, can I ask the committee members why has this been explored? It was, and what happened? But just the beginning, like there's some donations. There's nothing has been made to try to get the rest of the field.
The website that was set up to do the survey, there were recommendations we put on there a level of commitment, and we did get several $100,000 level of commitment. But when I speak here with you, why that's not the best.
Okay. I just also had a question as well. There's also some confusion. Which athletes are using these fields? Is it for lacrosse team, soccer, field hockey, and football? Will it be open to the public, or is this going to be gated fields? I have read that these fields are not maintenance free. Those droppings have to be physically removed because they don't biodegrade. Lawn chairs can damage them. Water bottle drippings have to be fixed. So some schools gate their fields, now making them a private field for certain sports and not for public use. Is that?
We haven't made that determination yet, and we haven't discussed how they would be utilized by the community. I know one of the items we have on the agenda, regular board agenda this evening, is fees for facilities, and whether or not we are going to be assessing fees and who would be using our fields and facilities. So I don't know. We haven't explored it. But with regard to the teams, John, would you like to address that?
Yeah, obviously, as you know, we have outdoor teams in fall and the spring. So at a high school in the fall, we have junior varsity and varsity with field hockey, girls and boys soccer, and football. That's pretty much the teams that would utilize those fields both during practices and in game situations. In the spring, you have boys and girls lacrosse. You have track and field that would utilize them. Covering them all. So there's a number of teams that would use them.
That's also my last question, is will the new track be impacted?
No.
Okay.
That maybe somebody, these guys can answer that. but from all the research that we know, the track would not be damaged or have to, taken up at all.
My name is Rich Barkey. I've lived in the district 34 years. My son graduated from I'm sorry. My name is Rich Barkey. I've lived in the district 34 years. My son Elias went through the school from the beginning, graduated, he's gone to college, got back. When I spoke to him, he wanted a lot of questions. He wanted to ask a lot of questions. So I was talking to him about this issue. I have a lot of financial concerns about this and health concerns about how that all works, just like everyone else does here. But he's now involved in a geoscience program. He's going to be a geoscientist. And he started throwing all these terms around, and he's going popular about this, what about that. And I'm going, no, I don't know about those things, Elias. But, without asking us, those technical questions, he was saying, what are the environmental factors around this issue? There's the manufacturing of the product. Before I even start there, in the Children's Library, one of the things that most of the local district here, one of the things that most of the children come in about, they look at books on animals, they look at books about the planet, they look at there's so much about the environment that our children want to know about. So then my son is asking me, saying, well, what about the manufacturing of the product? What about the shipping of it, the shipping cost, the environmental impact of shipping that? Where does it come from? Is this made locally, or is it made from around the world and is it being shipped here? He's asking me about the recycling of that. What is how do we recycle this field? The material degradation. Then he starts talking about the oil. We live on Long Island as an aquifer, and have there any studies been done about this material breaking down and leaching down, not in our time, not in our lifetime, but eventually working its way down to the aquifer. We're talking about permeability and runoff and all those things. So, I know there might be some advantages to the field. I don't really know what they are. Maybe they're safer, maybe things don't burn on as much. I don't know. I have concerns about vandalism. But all those environmental impacts really do our children, I think, a disservice, because our kids don't want to necessarily be playing on artificial turf. They want to save our environment. And it's really our responsibility to bring them along in that environment. So I'm not opposed to the fields in general, in theory, but it just doesn't make sense with what we want to go teach our children.
As we are approaching close to the end of our designated time for the forum, I would ask that nobody further get on the back of the line. I'm hoping, well, yes, Mr. Saras, you'll have an opportunity. As I had said earlier, we do have somewhat of a soft time deadline that we will have to respect. So.
Good evening, Mary Snellenman from TJL PTA. I have a question from the community. One of the major questions has been, is this the best way to spend this added tax revenue? Although we understand that a capital bond is not the same as an increase in revenue towards school taxes, theoretically, if the community would buy into spending an extra $30 per household towards the regular school budget, how much revenue would that generate? And what types of additions could this be used for?
In terms of how much revenue would be generated, as I think we've already addressed, at the moment it would be impossible for us to put a dollar value on that one because we don't currently have a policy to generate any revenue. And even once that policy may be developed, it's unclear based on the experience of our neighborhood districts as to exactly how much money we do plan to generate. In terms of how else the money could be used, that's certainly a very open discussion at budget season. I guess lead to our discussion about how we utilize our resources in the district.
Speak up.
Right, if we agreed to pay $30 extra, to say we want to give each of our households will give $30 towards our school budget, what would that buy us? How much revenue would be generated from that? And what could that buy us? Every year we say a cup of coffee, to reiterate from last year, that's how much we would have to spend to get what was possibly anticipated. member, I'm trying to read and expand on that. So if we were to spend $30, seems like a rather large amount of money that we could do a tremendous amount for our school budget. And we're just curious as to what that might be.
Would you like to take a shot at that?
Doing the reverse of this calculation prior, the $30 would yield $195,000 worth of addition to the budget. Because this net result of $260,000 minus $65,000 CD puts $195,000 on top of the tax levy. So reversing that, $30 would generate $195,000 of expenses in the year.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Oh, wait, so, can you just elaborate a little bit more on the impact of, let's say, an operating cost expense versus a capital cost expense and the impact on the tax levy tax? In other words, if we wanted to take $195,000 and apply it to an operating expense, a person, let's say, 3 people, would that put us over the tax levy cap? Well, based on the scenario from last year, I'm giving as an example, 3.18%. 3.18% was
Yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
3.18% was our tax levy cap that was allowable last year.
Right.
If we took $195,000
Put it on
and
top.
put towards a person, 3 people within the district, would that put us over the tax levy cap, or would it still keep us within the tax levy cap?
I'm not understanding that, but if our tax levy cap last year was 3.18%, and we decided to put an additional $195,000 on top of the budget, on top of that, you would go to 3.52%.
Wait, but
But you would not actually argue to say what I think John's trying to say with the shackles or shackles. We would break the tax cap if we are doing what is proposed, and we would not be within the tax cap.
I think that's what the question is. If we were willing to override the cap, what at $30? The community said, we're willing to override the cap, and we'll give you $30 per household. That would allow us to pierce the cap by $195,000. Not clear.
no, Bill, I think I get it. The thing is, one of the comments that we keep hearing is that can't we take this money and maybe better utilize it? But we've always been tax cap conscious.
Correct.
Okay? If we wanted to take $195,000 and add it to operating expenses from our last year's budget,
Right.
it would put us over the tax levy cap.
Exactly,
Not-
right. Mhm.
Okay, which would require what percentage of our community to then support?
60%.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
So it's a different cost.
Thank you. I think this has been touched on, but I'm not sure we got a clear-cut answer. This proposal involves a 15-plus year commitment in terms of paying it back. So it involves a 15-plus year commitment from the community. If in those 15 years we end up with a failed budget, what do you see the impact on this district being? We're locked into these costs. What kind of an impact do you see?
Bill, how would that affect our budgeting in a given budget season?
Then, if a budget fails under the tax cap scenario, the levy has to stay the same as it was the prior year. Okay? What impact that would have is, we couldn't speculate on what it would be. But your tax levy would be fixed at the same rate as the prior year. So there'd be a tremendous amount of cuts that are necessary to meet that.
But yet we would still have to pay the maintenance costs. We'd still have to replace the fields, possibly before the 15 years is up, while all these other cuts are being made.
Well, it depends on when that would happen. I mean, if that happened 2 or 3 years from now, obviously we're not replacing the field then. If it should happen to mix when, well, it could also, you could have discretion on whether you want to replace that field. One of the districts replacing the field this year is about 3 years past its due. And they obviously made decisions not to replace the field, and maybe they had other budgetary problems that they choose not to do that. But to speculate on what the impact would be, in a failed budget, there's too many options there.
Could we choose not to? I mean, at that point, we know last year every penny counts when you're coming in, over budget, no matter what.
Could we choose not to maintain those fields for a year?
Well, yeah, we could, I mean, that could be part of the, you know, if we had 0% levy increase, there'd be a lot of things. And one of those things might be not to maintain the fields, one of them might be not to mow the grass except for every other week. You know, there's lots of things that could happen. You know, it would be the board's decision, the administration decision to try and come up with those cuts.
Okay. And my second question was just, I know we've mentioned a couple times Dr. Gefkin did a study as far as, or he wrote down some information and sent it out to the community as far as the safety impact of turf fields. Could we hear a little bit about that? Would it be possible for him to maybe share a little bit of that with the community?
We can
at
give
some
him
point?
about a 30-second summary because we need to get to the other questions. Again, the information is readily accessible on the website.
Again, if you look at the memo that's on the website, it touches on some of the concerns in the past, ranging from amounts of injuries, fear of when the turf breaks down, lead poisoning. Really, a lot of those things have not been proven. There's no specific changes in the amount of injuries. The amount of lead exposure is negligible. It was not found to be a health concern. There's also latex particles that are found in the crumb, but people that have been latex allergic have not had an issue with that. Really, the two concerns, the major one is really heat exposure. Okay? These fields get very hot, and it would have to be a very conscious effort to keep our players cool and hydrated. Okay? The other thing, if you fall on a turf versus a natural grass, there's going to be a little bit different injury because somebody's get a different type of burn. But as far as infection rates, there's been rumors about the harboring MRSA. There's been no statistically differences in the rates of infection of one field versus the other.
Good evening. My name's Bonnie Cheskis. I live here in Harbor Fields for, I don't even know, 12 years now. And I thank the board for listening to this proposal and giving the community a lot of information. I had a few questions that maybe the board could help me with. Right now, you've estimated the budget at approximately $3 million. If anyone here has ever done any renovations within their home, you have a budget, and then you have what the cost of your renovation was. I did a kitchen. My kitchen didn't come in at my budget. I love my kitchen. I still finished it. But what happens when our $3 million turf fields are 20% over that? Because generally, when you do renovations, they actually guesstimate that you're going to be 20 to 40% over cost. Things happen. You didn't expect to need to redo the track. You didn't expect whatever. So what happens then? That's a question.
Okay. As was alluded to earlier, the cost estimates that architects put together, they put certain contingency values in there. Those contingency values are based on design, they're based on construction, they're based on escalation of costs, and they're based on what they call soft cost, which is the cost of advertising, the cost of the vote, and so forth. We would establish a base. Okay, say it's $3 million that we're looking at. We would probably, in consultation with the architect, develop a base that, say for argument's sake, we decide $2.5 million. And we go out for a bid. And we say, okay, we go out for a bid, and the bids come in at $2.5 million. At that point, we feel safe that all the contingency values, if they would occur, will still keep us under the $3 million. If the bids go out and bids come in at $2.9 million, there'd be a lot of speculation as to whether or not we can actually progress this project and keep it under the $3 million. We're required to keep it under $3 million.
You know, we're having a hell of a time hearing you.
Even with the microphone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. If say the 2.9, we'd probably go back and the architects would re-engineer the project, try and cut some costs here and there, keep the project essentially the same, but reduce some costs here and there, go out for bid again. We wouldn't proceed unless we thought we could finish the project under the allocated dollars.
Thank you. A couple other questions. Mr. Valente, you mentioned...
Excuse me. I'll give you the opportunity for one more question so we have the opportunity for everybody else to speak. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Valente, you mentioned Suffolk County had 58 districts and approximately half of them had turf, half of them didn't have turf. How many schools within our athletics? We play Division III. How many within Division III actually have turf fields? And my second question is, you know, again, we are in public education, and we have to remember we are doing a public education. So is this something that we really need, or is this a nice
thing to have. So those are my questions.
In answer to your first question, the schools that we generally compete against, I'm thinking off the top of my head here because I don't have my notes right handy, I would say it's probably a 50-50 split. Okay, Rocky Point just recently, about 2 months ago, finalized their turf field. Sable does not have a turf field in our conference. You know, it varies because we do play teams outside of classification. So, you know, even though we are Division III, we may be playing other teams outside of that depending on the sport.
How many students total actually play sports on those fields versus how many students do we have here in the district?
If you look at it from the fall and the spring, I would say you're probably talking about 250 to 300 student athletes that would probably be playing on those fields, both junior varsity and varsity.
Thank you.
Janine DeSallo from Washington Drive PTA. I have a community question. Does the athletic department believe that our players are at a disadvantage by not playing and practicing on turf fields? What are the primary benefits of playing on turf fields? Are the benefits related to the use of the fields versus actual play? And would the marching band benefit from the turf fields?
And I think Mr. Valenti's pretty much worked through all of those except for the marching band. We'll get to that in a second. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Valenti, other than what you stated already? Related to the marching band?
I think I don't really see any benefit to the marching band. I mean, they practice on the field, you know, adjacent to the fields, and they perform during different events. But I know in some other districts they have competition bands. They probably would take advantage of a field like that more so than our band, but our band does well on the field that we have.
But the band can practice, the marching band can practice and use the turf?
Their sneakers will be cleaner.
My name is Kathleen Panarello. I'm sorry, I've been in the district for about 12 years. I'd like to talk briefly about handicap accessibility because I don't think there's been a lot of discussion tonight about that, except for maybe some implications that there was some kind of strategic inclusion of that in the bill, which, as far as I know, is completely false. I know that my husband is in a wheelchair. My son has been involved in athletics through Harborfield since he was in kindergarten, and it has been a challenge for my husband to be able to attend practices, games. I think the inclusion in this bill is the first time we have reached out to the district on multiple occasions. This is the first time anyone has responded to us and taken accessibility in hand and attempted to it's critical for every student, family, friend, anybody to be able to go support our athletic teams, our marching band. Maybe it won't benefit the marching band, but it will certainly benefit the family who wants to go and attend and see the marching band perform.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ernie Fazio. I live up on the Westfield Drive. I've been there for 44 years. And let me take off my hat so you can see what I look like. I can tell you this, if you look at me, you'll believe it. I grew up in Queens when much of Queens was still farmland, and we played sports. And I can tell you it wasn't organized sports. And it was about as disorganized as you could get. But from that modest community came several successful lawyers, several military people who I'm very proud to know, and various other successful people. Sports has very little to do with the outcomes of our lives. You people are in the business of educating people. And I want to tell you something, you do a good job. This has nothing to do with education. This is the wants and needs of a few people who have kids in sports and they want this for themselves. That does not mean that you have to... You can rationalize this and say it's $30 a year or whatever the number is. I wouldn't care if it was 30 cents a year. It has nothing to do with your mission. And that's why I object to it. In addition to the fact that we already are properly taxed, we pay a lot of money to put the kids through school. Now, I don't have any kids in school anymore, but they were educated here, and you guys did a good job. But they did not need sports to become the successful individuals that they are.
Just ask you to wrap it up,
I
sir.
have nothing against music programs. I have nothing against sports programs. I have nothing against all of the extracurricular things. But pay for it if you want it out of your own pocket. Don't ask the people at large to pay for your wants and needs. And I think, you know what? I don't think this board actually wants this deal. I think they're on our side. But to allow this thing to happen,
Sir, can you wrap it up, please?
to let this thing happen is, I don't know how you stop it, but it's got to be stopped. Now, we do have a vote on that, right? And we can bury it.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Thank you. This would be a good opportunity to remind the members of the community that noticed that both this forum as well as in previous board meetings that the Board of Education as a body has not taken a public position on this proposition, as that is because of state law. Upon the advice of our attorneys, we are unable to do that. So the board has no official position on this proposition, nor will it before the vote.
Hi, Lori Thomas. My concern is the $20,000 or so that we're spending on the vote and how we go about changing the protocol that allows such a vote to take place. I understand that possibly this isn't the right time to go into that. However, I think we need to know what the protocol is and how to go about starting that process so that we don't have to do this again, say in February when someone else wants to throw another agenda on the table. What do we do? How do we prevent it from happening again? I mean, it's one thing if it's an emergency educational issue or a security issue, but this is not an emergency. So how do we prevent us from wasting $20,000?
Yes, this is a state statute, so in order for the state to have to change the legislation in order to prevent such a proposition coming forward again.
So what do we do?
You have to be up to the state of New York legislature.
Okay. Thank you.
Been through the entire system. I can't help but notice that the agendas that the students used to receive at the beginning of every year are no longer available to us, and many electives that used to be available to freshmen coming into the high school are now no longer there. So I was wondering if everything passes and everything goes as planned, will any more electives be cut, any teachers or personnel be fired, and will any extracurricular activities also be cut?
Thank you for joining our community forum tonight. Those are questions that at this point in time we're not able to address. We will begin to address those questions once we start the budget process for 2014-15, which will probably begin in January and go through the month of May. So I hope that you'll be able to join us for those meetings, and you'll hear what the plans are for next year. Thank you.
Good evening. Ian Benson. Moved into the neighborhood 20 years ago. As you can hear, I'm not from New York or the Bronx or Brooklyn. I have to say, I admire the decorum here. I thought you'd only find this in England, right? I thought New Yorkers were much wilder than this. But anyway, I have two children here, both of them extremely sporty. Both of them love the athletics. They're on JV, pulled up to varsity, big contributor to the win of the league, of the soccer JV, which the high school won the league this year. So I'm a great supporter of, I think, the sports and the whole school district, Harborfield School District is fantastic. I really love it. But this idea of spending $3 million on a field that hardly anybody's going to use or don't need, I just think it's just crazy. With you guys, you can do so many improvements with this, and I'm just not really sure how this even got to this point, I have to say. I mean, again, this school district is fantastic. I mean, I'm looking up there, one of the reasons why I got up to speak, National Blue Ribbon School. It wasn't because you spent $3 million doing up your building or your fields, right? It's because of the dedication of you guys, the teachers, right? And the sports facilities, I'm gonna have to tell you, I don't know how many people played soccer as a kid, but I tell you one thing, my kid loves when the fields get wet and really muddy. Loves playing in it, loves coming home caked in mud. You wouldn't get that with the little rubber root chips. Seriously, guys, you know, shortage of teachers, tax cuts. Yeah, shortage of teachers, that's my doctor, by the way. Shortage of teachers, tax cuts, and everything else that you guys need here, $3 million on fields. You've got to really think about this again.
Assuming Mr. Saras, you're going to tell us how we got to this place.
I decided I'm against the field. Yeah, I guess I should be. Certainly, if you listen to what you're hearing here, everybody should be against it. So let me give you a little bit of background and maybe a little perspective, because it seems we're missing the perspective. And the one perspective you don't hear is the perspective of the students and the student athletes. You hear every parent, we're talking about money, we're talking about budgets, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of information. This started, quite honestly, as a grassroots movement. Grassroots, that's right, that money grassroots that we were just talking about. It started as a grassroots movement, but really was driven by the students. Because I am an active parent, I do see many different sports being played, and the question always came back as we traveled from district to district, why can't we have the same kind of facilities that these other districts have? Now, some of it is, who cares? Our students care. And maybe we should care what our students care about. So the question that came back, why can't, drove the parents to ask the same question, why don't? And the common thread that is pulled throughout this is not a thread that because no other district has a parent that decided to make this a priority. It's because those 110 districts plus growing on Long Island, they made it a priority. And it's because the majority of the other districts within Huntington, they made it a priority. And they decided that it wasn't just the high academic standards, which our school is obviously known for, but it's the entire student. It's the extracurricular activities. It is the theater. It is the music program. It's all these other programs, including athletics. So when the question came back, why can't we? The answer was, well, we could. But it took somebody to decide if the district was not going to pioneer this effort, somebody could. And that's how this came about. So the district is very impartial, and I appreciate that. This has been a long and winding road to get to this point. Having said that, some of the ideas and some of the information, and probably the largest question that comes to play, is this discussion of, if we do this, how many teachers are we firing? Now, unfortunately, I was not able to put up some of the PowerPoints that we've done for the PTA and some others. We have a $77 million budget. If our budget was the length of a football field, we're discussing 1 foot. That's what we're discussing. 1 foot out of the entire football field. Now I understand, it's $3 million. It's $3 million over 15 years. That is an impact. But the question is, over the last 8 years, and we did the analysis, both with the help of the SED in New York State and with the district on our own, and looked at the tax increases that this community has stood at this microphone and asked to pierce the cap year after year, and we paid those tax increases. And the question became, from our committee, how much of that money, year after year after year, makes its way back to the students? And what's the answer? Less than 4% of our yearly increases, averaged over the last 8 years, can find their way back to our students. So now here's the question. Now here's the question. We're talking about a $3 million project. Some people want to say, well, it's just the JV students, only the varsity athletes. No. I've been to 16 other school districts. We did a lot of research. There are feeder programs. There are youth programs. There are travel team programs. There are sports programs. There are summer programs. This is not just about a JV or a varsity athlete. This is about the entire community. This is about kids who can start at a young age, get on a great facility, learn great skills, leverage those skills, maybe to the varsity level. And now we can talk about the full-rounded student in this academically challenging time to get into a college. What kind of things can these kids leverage? Yes, it's good to have theater background and music background. But we did the research. One of the #1 things that helps kids, that little leverage, is participation in a sport. Doesn't have to be Division I. It can be Division II. It can be Division III. My daughter is a living example of that. She's looking at schools now because of a silly little ability to run around on a field and knock a ball back and forth, but that silly little ability is giving her access to practically what we'll call an Ivy League school because of that. That door would never have been opened without this. So if you want to talk about the benefits, the ultimate benefits, not only to the community, what's the value of our community? Our value of a community is made up of the wonderful academic things that this board has done, and the extracurricular activities, but our assets as well. And if we allow our assets not to be increased, not to be beautified, not to be, especially in the sports program, not to be better, then why are we here at all? So at the end of the day, I know we don't have the time for all this, and I could go on and give you all the information, but the reality is, you're passing a bond, you're getting a tax increase on that. We're getting state aid that we pay to the state, that currently gets sent to Rocky Point or other schools. Our New York State aid go to those schools to increase their facilities. We don't take advantage of that. So we have a $3 million project that the state is willing to kick in $750,000 for over the 15 years. That $30 a year, understand, yes, there's maintenance costs, we could peel that on your back as far as you'd like to go. But at the end of the day, I think every decision that this board makes and this district makes has to answer 2 questions. What benefit is this to our students? What benefit is this to our district? You have a project in front of you that obviously is going to benefit student athletes from young to older. And we obviously, you know that it's going to intrinsically increase the benefit of the community just to have these beautiful fields. I sat with the director at Huntington High School, and he told me, we put these fields in. I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish. People come into his office, and the first thing they take out is their Google Earth map, and they look at the facilities that they have there. So you have to really consider.
Please, can you give Mr. Saros the same respect that all the other speakers have had? Thank you.
You have to really consider that at the end of the day, whether our students are worth $2.50 a month to give them this kind of facility? And if the answer is, I don't think our students are worth it, realize the budget doesn't change. If we're gonna let teachers go next year, we're gonna let teachers go next year because this is just money coming back into the till. This project doesn't happen, none of that changes. So we have an opportunity to give back to our students for a very minor amount of money and get a very large bang for the buck. Or, that's the beauty of this process, the community can decide not to do it, and whatever happens with the budget continues to happen regardless of this project.
This is actually going to be the last speaker. I feel like the person closing the grocery store line, but when I did announce that we would not be able to accept any more speakers, this gentleman was the last one on the line. So I'm sorry, but we've already far exceeded our time limit.
I'm sorry. You let them speak well on.
I'm sorry as well, but go on, sir.
My name's Steve Goldstein. I live in Centerport. I want to thank Dr. Tadaro for helping me understand how we got to this vote tonight. I didn't realize that the state allows us, and that's another issue. But we're here tonight to address a community-led bond proposition to replace the existing turf fields at the high school with new synthetic turf fields and to remove asbestos floor tiles in the high school corridors. A few other issues are noted in the proposition as well, such as the handicap access, but weren't explained in detail in the newsletters that some of you may have received in the mail. The truly important issues tonight are, do we need to replace the existing turf fields? At what cost would it be to do so now and in the future? And the concern about asbestos-related materials. Also, just as important in these proposals is the risk to the health of those who walk the corridors and use the athletic fields. Is there a risk? With regard to the asbestos floor tiles, the District Board of Education state that the tiles pose no health or safety risks whatsoever to the student and faculty body, nor the general public. So it sounds to me like we don't need to replace the tiles. With regard to the replacement of the turf fields, the District and Board of Education have made it clear that they are not the ones bringing this proposition to a vote. What concerns me most, aside from the enormous expense to replace something that works, is the health issues associated with synthetic turf fields. According to Dr. Jack Gefkin, the Harborfield school physician who was asked to research the health implications of synthetic turf, his research shows that heat stress is of utmost concern with synthetic turf fields. His report states that the temperatures of the fields can reach up to 200 degrees on warm, sunny days. Aren't these the days that most students, staff, and faculty, family members are most likely to use these proposed new fields? I took a picture today of a sign that is posted to the entrance of the new synthetic fields in the village of Oyster Bay. The sign has a large red warning advising that at certain times of the day and season, extreme caution should be used in the use of these fields. Here's a picture of the sign. I know we don't have a document camera. I can't put it up. I'll read it.
Wrap it up.
Here's the warning. Warning from the town of Oyster Bay. Temperatures on synthetic turf fields can be significantly higher than those of natural turf fields. During hot weather and sunny days, all users of these fields should use caution and be aware of possible heat stress. All users should remain hydrated. Coaches and parents should be aware of the signs of heat-related stress and injury.
Can you try and wrap it up, sir?
Yeah. I often stop for lunch and dinner near this park overlooking Oyster Bay and wonder why there's so few people using it during the daytime. When I asked one of the kids why it was so empty at that time of the day, he said, "Man, it's too hot to play in the daytime. We come in the late afternoon when it's cool enough to play." So for both parts of the proposition, the removal of the tiles and the replacement of the athletic fields, neither of these is in any way needed, and in the case of the synthetic turf proposal, these fields can cause serious harm by heat stress to the people using these fields. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for attending this evening at a future time.
We have been waiting a long time for this
Sorry,
meeting.
ma'am, but the forum has
Sorry,
concluded.
I have something new to say, and that is, the district didn't look for this. This was brought to them from people in our community. After this process is done, whether this passes or doesn't pass, it's bleeding about $20,000 from our budget. That could be $20,000 that could have made that wheelchair accessibility that lady asked for. So I just want to caution our community that when you have an idea, please think about what it's going to do to the community. Just the process
Ma'am,
is taking money.
I apologize, but the
Yes,
forum
sir,
has
I'm
ended.
almost done. Just wait.
You can have it.
I just want to say, think twice before you bring something. Make it a broad proposition, and perhaps we'll have a chance of getting it passed.
Thank you. The regularly scheduled board meeting will begin in approximately 5 minutes. So if anybody would like to remain, we invite you to stay for our meeting. Thank you.
Hi, I understand you all have to get home, and this is just something really important I thought that you guys should all know. My friend Bobby spoke before. He's the only other student that got to give his opinion and facts. Personally, what I have to say isn't an opinion. I take AP Government in my high school. I'm a senior at Harbor Fields High School. And a project that we did, we're studying election polls. I went around the school with 2 of my friends, and we asked students, recorded their responses, and created data charts. A majority of the students that we asked that were football players said they are opposed to the field. And then we personally don't understand why, as Mr. Sarro said, it was a very interesting point that you made. You said if it's too much to spend $2.50 on our students a day, a week, month, whatever it is, month, thank you. If $2.50 a month is too much to spend on our students, who is it that we're really spending it on? Are we spending it on the football players? Because some of them don't really even want the field. So personally, I'm an art student. I don't play football. Last year I took an art class that had up to 40 students in it. We didn't have any room to put our campuses on the table. We had to share tables with 5 people. And honestly, the $2.50 aren't going to me. I mean, I'm graduating. I'm going to college next year. I don't really care. I mean, my brother wants to play football. That's great for him, but I mean, does he? I was talking to a football coach. He told me he could never imagine in all his years of living playing football on anything but grass. I mean, if you were telling me that the football coach at our high school wants grass, and a majority of the students I asked that are football players want grass, then who is this turf field going to? It's not going to me. If it's not going to them, who's it going to?